Hi, my name is Alejandro Perez, and this is the AI Coffee Podcast. Every week, you will have one disruptive aspect of technology and artificial intelligence for the time to drink a cup of coffee. Welcome to the AI Coffee Podcast. I'm very excited because this episode is a bit special. I recorded this in person inside the Ministry of Digital Transformation and Civil Service a couple of days ago. And I also have a very special guest. So this is just the introduction of the episode. You will see the guest in a couple of seconds if you continue watching this episode. And his name is Alberto Gago. And Alberto Gago is the director of the Office for a Digital Spain 2030 and also International Relations and member of the Cabinet of the Secretary of State for Digitalization and Artificial Intelligence for the Government of Spain. He is a magnificent guest, and you will learn a lot about the sandbox of artificial intelligence, which is one of the first ones inside the European Union. And also, you will learn a lot about the regulations of artificial intelligence, how the Spanish government sees this as part of the strategy for the future. If you want to know more about artificial intelligence for society, please subscribe to this channel. I will share more and more things every week. So please subscribe to the podcast. It will give me a lot of power and energy to continue. And if you want to know more about this interview, you have it in a couple of seconds. So let's go. Hi, Alberto. How are you? Welcome to the AI Coffee Podcast. Thank you for inviting me to this super amazing place. We are in person. This is the first time I record in person. So also you will see. And we are in the Ministry of Digital Transformation and Civil Service. So hello.
Hello, welcome to our ministry. We're very happy to have you here and to be able to talk about what we do for the economy and society in Spain, but also how we represent Spain outside abroad. The objective of the ministry as well as the one of the Secretary of State is to ensure that we communicate as much as possible on the things that we do, because at the end of the day, it's for the people. So it's a pleasure to receive you here and to show you where we work.
Thank you very much. So, Alberto, before we start talking about artificial intelligence and Spain agenda regarding that, let's start first talking about yourself, because I think it's very interesting for the audience to understand your context, your life behind. So, I have seen on LinkedIn that you have been working across the European Commission, the OECD, and now you are in the Spanish government working. So, what personal motivation has driven you to stay in this intersection between policy, tech, and society?
So I think life took me this way. I mean, I didn't choose specifically to work on on technology or telecommunications or digital, but I always had a vision that I wanted to do something for the general interest. Mm-hmm. And one of my dream places to work on when I was studying, it was the European Commission. So I started there as a Blue Book trainee. Mm-hmm. And it was an amazing experience. I got lucky, so I stayed there for 8 years after that. And I remember that I started in health policy. I was not doing specifically digital policy. So I was for 4 years in health policy, and then I moved on to data economy when I was in the last 4 years until 2020. And that was really interesting because it shows you that you are at the forefront of innovation and you are discussing things that are not already decided, but you are taking decisions on new aspects of life, and the way how digital technologies will be deployed in economy and in society have a strong impact on the daily life of people. And I believe that it was very interesting from the very beginning when I was working on that matter. I was usually in the Commission working on regulations on data economy, so how to use data for productivity for the economy, but always respecting the rights of citizens, data protection, but also the rights of non-personal data that could be attached to a company, for example, commercial secrets or intellectual property. And that was very interesting because it was basically setting the ground or setting the pillars of how the new digital economy and society was going to be built upon. And then I got lucky, to be honest with you, that Carme Artigas, the previous Secretary of State, in 2020 decided to, I don't know, save me from the rain in Luxembourg because it was very rainy. And I started working with her in 2020 here as an advisor in her cabinet, and mainly focused on the international dimension of digital policy. And until then, also since then, I've been working for the subsequent secretaries of state until we arrived to Maria González Veracruz. And I think it's very it has a particular taste to be able to help society build, the frameworks that help the innovators, but also companies to do more with technologies, but at the same time ensure that citizens don't have any risks attached to, or at least the least possible risks attached to that use of technologies.
It sounds really interesting, but also for the audience, for understanding a little bit better what you are doing here in the ministry, can you explain your role a bit?
Yeah, so since November, more or less, I am now responsible for a new office that has been created that is called Digital Spain 2030 and International Relations. And it focuses mainly on ensuring that there is a strategy for different aspects of the competence of the Secretary of State that helps Spain position itself and to some way focalize its efforts into a particular area, so that by 2030 we are a more competitive country, but also always respecting the rights and freedoms that we have all given each other. So what we do is basically that, is strategies for different aspects of digital transformation. We have just finished one on quantum technologies. We will start new strategies in the days to come. And also what we do as well is we lead on strategic projects of the Secretary of State that she believes that are particularly important, like, for example, the sandbox on AI. And apart from that, we ensure the, let's say, political representation in the different fora that deal with digital policy across the world. So we are talking about not only the European Union, in which we work together with the permanent representation, which is based in Brussels, but also with the OECD, the United Nations, and a lot of focus we have as well on the different regional organizations, like, for example, the Secretary General for Iberoamerica, or other organizations that have a role in other aspects, for example, the Council of Europe, with regards to, for example, AI, but also other international ones like the UNESCO that has been working a lot lately, not only on AI, but also on neurotechnologies.
It's very interesting that your role is taking a Spain context to the international sphere, which I think is very relevant. But just before we start talking about the sandbox, that I think you are really wanting to talk about that, I would like you to talk a bit about something I also saw on your LinkedIn profile that I think is very relevant, is that you say that you believe on data altruism. And
Yes.
somehow you think that you mentioned the importance of data being used for the public good. Can you explain this a bit?
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is not the position of necessarily of the ministry, but it's my personal interest. When I was working in the European Commission, I led a policy which was how to use data for public interest, and usually it's data from the private sector.
Okay.
And what we realized is that usually the public entities, the public sector, releases a lot of open data for the benefit of transparency, but also for the benefit of economy, because a lot of businesses can be built on the basis of that open data. But also, what we realize is that the private sector, the information that the private sector holds, can also be very useful for for advancing, for example, research, or for ensuring that there is a more evidence-based public policy. And we developed this policy in a way that we would encourage the sharing of data between the private sector and the public sector. There was a report published, and that was to some extent included in the law, the regulation on data, that was adopted in 2023. But then within that conversation, we also saw the viability, the interest, the possibility that individuals, they could also share their personal data for particular objectives that could be linked to their willingness to contribute to the public interest. One of the examples was, for example, the possibility to share anonymized, and this is important, is not share personal data, raw data, but anonymized data from, for example, your medical records for particular research that could be done in order to advance, for example, treatments against certain diseases like cancer or like any other. And this is already happening. In Spain, for example, there is an NGO who collects in privacy data from individuals, health data from individuals, and helps scientific organizations research upon that data. But it's not only, I mean, the health sector is the most evident sector where we can create a lot of value out of that data, but also the mobility sector could also be one that is interesting. For example, if we could share anonymize, obviously, as I repeated it a lot because I don't want to pass the idea that is raw data where you can find people or locate people or identify them. But imagine if everyone in a city can share their mobility data. This could enhance a lot how we are planning public transportation. It can also enhance a lot where people walk more, and then maybe create pedestrian pathways for that. So those could be very insightful information that could inform public policies at the local level and at the regional level in order to better the lives of citizens. And I think it could be done from a common perspective, not necessarily only through studies of big let's say consultancy firms, but also through the action and the involvement of individuals.
And actually, as I mentioned you before the interview, I work with in the entrepreneurship world, and it's also very relevant for creating small startups with these small pieces of data, as you mentioned, to create specific needs. Like, for example, why not to create one specific application for tracking, as you said, maybe the movements of the city for, I don't know, improving the traffic lights, for example. This is something very possible and very positive for society, as you mentioned. Yes, I agree.
I recommend your audience to look into this website that is called datacollaboratives.org. And this is led by Stefan Berghast from the New York University. And there he has listed all the different, let's say, collaborations on data for the benefit of individuals and of the public interest. And I think it's very informative as well. Also, the UN has done a lot of work on that through the UN global polls, and it has put forward a lot of initiatives on the basis of data and AI for the public interest. So we also, it's not, I mean, this conversation is not only about economy and productivity, which is important, and competitiveness of our countries, but also about the social progress that we can bring to our countries.
True. And let's start talking about the main topic of this episode, which is the AI Sandbox. And this is a term I have seen many of them. For example, on the Secretary of State news and media, you talk often about the sandbox. But I guess that for the majority of my audience, even me sometimes, we don't have it clear what it is. And actually, can you explain why it is so important to create these sandboxes and how they are actually? Yeah.
Okay. So basically what we saw, I'm going to start from the very beginning, even if I extend a bit more. When we started at the European level investigating on the need to regulate AI, we saw one thing in the public consultation, which was the legal uncertainty that companies had in order to put AI systems into the market. They didn't know what was going to be the responsibility of these companies if that AI system didn't do its work properly and created some damage. Because of that legal uncertainty, amongst many other reasons, like for example the discrimination that algorithms can create in society, the European Commission decided to undertake the decision to do the AI regulation. Doing regulation means, and this is to a certain extent true, means creating a burden on companies, but not only on companies, also on the public sector, because it also applies to us. This regulation, it's creating a burden that if we want to be really competitive, we cannot ignore. And we need to do something about it, and we need to accompany companies in ensuring that barrier is, or that burden is lowered somehow. And that's why the regulation also included the obligation for the different member states to create regulatory sandboxes. When this was put into the legislation, we came with the question is how we are going to do as a regulatory sandbox. What is it different from any other sandbox that is out there? Because what we see in other sandboxes is that they create a development environment where people start coding, and then you have access to the guts of the whole AI system or whatever other digital technology that you are developing in that sandbox. We believe that was too intrusive. So we decided that our sandbox was going to be like a relationship and a consultancy type of sandbox, in which what we will do is basically select a number of companies that have put forward high-risk AI systems or are going to put forward high-risk AI systems into the market, and work with them on how we can apply the requirements of the regulation applicable to high-risk AI systems into their particular systems. And how we are going to do that? First of all, we are going to have training period. So we have developed around 15 guidelines on how to operationalize each of the requirements of the regulation applicable to high-risk AI system. And I'm talking about 15 because some of the requirements they have three aspects. For example, you have precision, robustness, and accuracy. So that's those for us is three different guides. So we're going to do training with them on what is being written in those guides, and also we are going to have specialists talking to them about how you need to operationalize it in a particular context. After the training period, what we're going to do is we are going to ensure that the 12 providers of these high-risk AI systems do an analysis of their AI system and how their building matches with the training that they have received, in a way that they identify where are the gaps of their system in order to comply with those requirements. Once they have found the gaps, we are going to create a plan with them on how we are going to fill those gaps, with which actions. The guidelines already have a number of examples, for example, use cases that have been used in the past, or particular technologies that could be useful for this or that other problem. But it might be that for some of the areas or the gaps that we have identified in this plan, there might not be let's say the response in those guidelines or in the training. And for that, we have created a group of experts, or we are going to create a group of experts that are more specialized, that will help these 12 companies understand how they can solve those gaps that are not initially planned. And after that, when they have designed their plan and they have filled in, let's say, the task that they have to do in order to accomplish or to fulfill that gap, we are going to have like let's say a adaptation process or a time for adaptation, in which those systems or those providers, they will work on their different tasks in order to adapt the system to the original guidelines, right? After that, once they have finished with all the work that they have to do in order to adapt the system, we will do a verification process with the agency for the supervision of AI, where they will, let's say, validate the approach that they have followed, and then they will receive like let's say some kind of informal seal of quality from the agency that those systems are the closest that exist today to being compliant with the regulation on AI. So as I say, it's a process of training, reflection on where we need to act, and adaptation.
And just also to clarify, as far as I understood, what you are measuring is the risk of potential risk of AI to be, I don't know, making a wrong decision and an ethical decision to harm another person or something like that. And is it like really possible to do these things nowadays? So maybe you need to do more research about what are the specific harms, potential harms of AI in different scenarios, because I guess this is something very tricky sometimes to understand this, and also the algorithms sometimes behind AI, that there are really black boxes and it's complicated to look for them. So how confident are you about this process to be done correctly and to have something good at the end, like a good report about this AI?
Well, you are never sure that things will work out the way you plan in the beginning. What we ensure is that our limit is the framework of the regulation. So we are not going to look for new risks that can be created, but we are going to focus on what the regulation says. High-risk AI systems are those that can significantly affect health, security, or the fundamental rights of people. So what we are going to do is to try to apply that through the requirements that are established in the regulation into our process. This is obviously a piloting experience. We are, as I said, we have developed these guidelines already. We are going to test them with these 12 providers somehow, because this is the added value to the rest of the society and the economy. We are going to test those guidelines with the experience of those 12 providers of AI systems, and then on the basis of their feedback, we are going to update those guidelines and publish them afterwards for the usefulness of everybody. Why we do that? Because at the end of the day, what we need to ensure is not that these 12 providers are the closest to being compliant with the regulation, but to ensure that the whole provider or a whole ecosystem of Spain has a tool in order to be able to adapt their systems to these requirements if they are developing these high-risk AI systems. One interesting part that I always think is interesting is important for the whole development of AI at European level is that those guidelines, we are doing them in collaboration with the European Commission as well, and with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And we are going to ensure or to make as much effort as possible that all the standardization process that has to come through the AI regulation or the normalization process that may come is built on that experience. Because Spain is the only one country in the whole European Union that has put this piloting experience forward, that has these guidelines adapted to that particular level of operationalization. And we believe that we bring an added value to the whole conversation at European level. And we do it in Spain because we want that our ecosystem is a leader in ensuring that they develop responsible AI. And that, imagine, for example, if we are publishing these guidelines, I don't know, next year, and then all the providers, the innovators in Spain can put them into practice already. Then if I am, I don't know, for example, a buyer of an AI system in Ireland, maybe I would go to a Spanish provider because I know that it is the closest that exists today to being compliant with the AI regulation. So that opens, the same way that the regulation can be a barrier, this opens an added value for those providers in Spain to sell as well outside of Spain, and not only outside of Spain. Let's dream a bit more, and let's recall the experience of the GDPR. The GDPR has become a golden standard. I believe that the AI regulation will become a golden standard as well for the world. Maybe we can have global systems being sold, but being fabricated from Spain, but sold everywhere, because, I mean, the golden standard is the AI regulation. It starts applying everywhere at a let's say, horizontal, holistic way, and our providers are the closest to that. But again, this is an ambition. It doesn't mean that it's going to become a reality. But I believe that this government, the Secretary of State, Maria González Veracruz, has all the energy, the effort, and the ambition to ensure that we are providing the best tools in order for our ecosystem to be much more competitive abroad. Here.
It's true that doing this metaphor with GDPR is very wise, because actually recently I needed to change some of my tools I was using as a business, as a freelance, because one of these tools wasn't compliant with GDPR, because it was in the United States, and this is more complicated. So I decided to change to a European tool, which I think, as you said, it could be more or less the same approach, right? Like with the AI Act and the AI regulations that are new little by little appearing in different countries. It's very interesting to understand that maybe this regulation, following the regulation, could be, let's say, a proof of like that we are doing things correctly. And also, as you said, for an AI provider, maybe in Spain, following the sandbox, the EU regulation, the EU framework, nowadays it will mean that maybe for the next years, maybe it's a guarantee that the things are done correctly. But before talking to other stuff, I want to also to come back to the sandbox idea and the sandbox process you are doing. So as I understood, this is like the first version of the sandbox.
Yeah.
Maybe in the next year we'll have another sandbox with new rules or new strategies, because AI also changes super quickly. So can you explain how will you measure this success of the sandbox?
Okay. So the success, how are we going to measure? It's first by let's say the content, the happiness, the fact that we have helped these 12 providers that we have selected. So if they are happy with the end result, we believe that it's going to be a good initiative. In general, when those updated guidelines that I told you about are put into the use of everybody, we will see whether they are useful fully for everyone. And I believe once, if people see them as a useful tool, then we will be successful with the experience. And as I say, this is a piloting experience, which for the 12 selected, the value or the added value that it has to them is that they will be the closest to being compliant with AI regulation, and the value that it is for the public administration and for the society in general is that we will have evidence-based guidelines on how to operationalize the requirements. I don't know what's going to happen next, because it very much depends on what is being discussed at the European Union level. In the regulation, it says that in 2 years' time from the date of the entry into force, we need to adopt an executive act on how we see sandboxes at European level, and what are the, let's say, the details or the characteristics of these sandboxes, in order for all the member states to have a harmonized vision on that. So we are now negotiating this vision, and once this vision is negotiated, we will know more whether our approach to sandbox is the correct one, which is this training, consultancy, and process of adaptation, or we need to go into something more, let's say, technological, by providing a server, by providing structures for development, infrastructure for development, and more tools that might be needed. And this only time will say whether we go from one approach in the European Union or we go for the other. We believe that either way, what happens in the future, having already guidelines is already a success, or when we have them, it will be a success already, because, as I say, it helps the providers, the society in general, but also it helps us, let's say, be more influential in the future process of standardization and have a competitive edge for our country in general.
Yeah, really interesting. But now I'm thinking with my maybe audience glasses, what's in,
Alright.
or ears, I don't know what's in or listening this episode. So imagine that thinking about, I don't know, an
Yeah.
SME, for example, a big company. So imagine that they are working with data, they are working with a specific use of this data. Maybe they have specific applications or websites or whatever they are doing for doing their work. But now they are thinking about integrating AI on their activities.
Yeah.
So how can this AI sandbox or something similar could benefit them in a short term?
That's a very difficult question, because, for example, first of all, I think there's a misconception on the regulation, which is that it applies to any AI system, and that's not the case. It only applies, well, it applies to, obviously, every AI system, but it only creates obligations on those that are high-risk AI systems. And then there are other obligations which are transparency obligations on some other potential AI systems, like, for example, deepfakes or things like that, right? And models as well, AI models. It also applies some transparency obligations. So when there is a new SME who is thinking of integrating an AI system into their normal business model, the first question that I would ask myself is that how is that AI system affecting either the security, the health, or fundamental rights of citizens? Most probably, or in the majority of cases, it will not, because the study that the European Commission has done is that it would only apply to 10 or 15% of all the AI systems that are created in Spain, in the European Union. So usually what that SME may have to do is probably ensuring that there is transparency on the fact that they are using AI. If they develop a chatbot, for example, that has a transparency obligation, they will need to make sure that there is somehow reference somewhere that they are talking, so the client is not talking to a person, is talking to a machine or to an AI system. But apart from that, I think that's pretty much what I would say to this type of SMEs that are looking to integrate AI.
Really, really interesting. But Alberto, now let's talk a bit about the future.
Okay.
Because AI is something that we all agree that it's the present. It has changed also the past. The last 4 years, it has been like a completely change and revolution because of AI. But how do you see the future? And actually, how do you see it from your personal perspective and also from your, let's say, Spanish government hat perspective?
The future is going to be complex because of the international situation that we are having right now, the geopolitical system that is being created internationally is going to be certainly complex. But I think that, as I mentioned before, the AI regulation is going to become a golden standard somehow. And that is going to be an added value for everyone who is producing technology in Europe. Because what we see, or what we believe, is that regulation and innovation, they don't have to be a dichotomy of I choose to do one or the other, but there is a room for responsible innovation, for responsible technology, and that it's little by little going to be settled down, not only in Europe but also in the world. With regards to our work in the sandbox, but also in the application of the regulation, I believe there is a potential, so there is a lot of work to do as well on competitiveness, on ensuring that we provide the tools for these innovators in Spain and in Europe in order to produce more AI systems. or models. And for that, there is the Commission has just released the AI Continent Plan, which a number of investments that are planned for example, with the gigafactories. Spain, before this continent plan, already was awarded with one of the 7 AI factories in our region. So that those factories are opening capacities, computation capacities for innovators. This is lowering the barrier, because why the US has been able to produce this type of models? Because they had the money, they had the infrastructure and the computation capacity. So now we're trying to lower barriers so that our ecosystem also has the ability to compete somehow. And opening computing capacities is one of them, of the AI factories, but also all the guidelines for the AI sandbox is also reducing the regulatory burden somehow, or the barrier at least. And also we are talking a lot about the community of open source AI in Spain, because we believe that innovation can also come from the grassroots, no? From those innovators that are in universities, those innovators that want to create a startup, and they just need the tools, but they have the knowledge, or they want to apply their knowledge and create new things. And I believe a lot of the business value in the future will come from intermediate services, which is the adaptation, maintenance, adaptation, integration, and maintenance of AI systems in the different value chains. For example, AI in the future has the potential to become like a technology that can be hyper specialized and hyper localized. So those that, let's say, modulate or they think of business models that comply or that are oriented to that particular provision of AI services, hyper specialized and hyper localized, may have a lot of potential in order to really, let's say, reindustrialize our economic fabric. Because let's not forget that Europe and Spain, 99% of our economic fabric are SMEs and micro SMEs. So you need this capacity of adaptators, integrators, and maintenance people that help the small and medium and the micro enterprises adapt and integrate AI in their systems and create value from that.
I agree, and actually, as far as I have seen in the business all around myself, I think I have seen two velocities. I have seen there are like a lot of early adopters that are using AI, are doing a lot of AI tools all around their businesses, but there are like thousands of SMEs that have never ever used ChatGPT even. So how do you see it? Is it possible to close this gap, or to create a bridge between these two velocities?
I think that what you're talking is a cultural change, and cultural changes are the most difficult ones to manage and to advance. I believe that with all these initiatives that the government of Spain is putting forward since the year 2020 until today, they are the basis for that cultural change to happen. But we will see that in 5-10 years. But you cannot. I believe we cannot. We should not be anxious that we need to close those two velocities already. Things take their time, but the important part is that, first of all, we put the pillars so that the cultural change is happening, but also we give time so that cultural change is somehow absorbed by people, and that requires not only creating initiatives but also communicating about them. And that's why also this podcast, but any other initiative that we are putting forward, it's so important to communicate it, because the more we talk about this, the faster it gets, we get to the change.
As we would say in Spanish, no por mucho madrugar amanece más temprano.
Totally.
Right?
So yeah, quien madruga desde la ayuda, no?
Exactly. So it means for the non-Spanish speaking audience that the sooner, I mean, if we run a lot, it doesn't mean that we are going to arrive good, right? That's more or less the translation, right? It would be. Okay, Alberto. So 2 questions for ending this episode. that I always ask to my guests in the podcast. So the first one is, which is your favorite type of coffee? Because this is the AI Coffee podcast, and coffee is super relevant here. So I guess that you like coffee. And then also, how can the audience connect with you or with your Secretary of State or whatever? So can you tell us?
So my favorite coffee is espresso.
Okay.
No sugar, no milk, no nothing, only the coffee. I particularly like the Colombian coffee. When I was in Colombia, I loved it. And then on how to connect, I mean, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so I'm always, I mean, we met each other through LinkedIn, and here you are. I'm always open to talk to everybody, but also, I mean, I'm just one part of a bigger entity, which is the Secretary of State. And Maria González Veracruz has always been very open as well to hear what people think and to try to bring solutions to the table. So through LinkedIn and through the normal connection on the website of the ministry as well, everyone can contact us, and we are happy to reply and to be in contact with.
Okay, it's true, because I'm here and I will put all the links on the description so people can follow it directly.
Okay.
So thank you, Alberto. It was a pleasure having you here in my podcast. And also thank you to Angela, Paola, and Alex, because they were also involved on this interview. So I'm super happy.
Particularly Angela, because she's the project manager of the Sandbox on AI, Angela Gash, and she's doing an amazing job in order to ensure that this is coming to reality, and super thank you to her.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you to you as well for having this time.
And thank you to you that are watching until the end.
Yes.